Um, in config, there's a folder called locales, and you can basically define. You have a file per language, and then you can define text, and then in the view you can alias it, and so to pull up the proper locale text. Um, and so here just English hello. So if you reference this T hello, right, it'll pull up the string that's appended onto the key. Um, this is pretty good if you're curious. You can learn more about here, but it requires you to have like a translated out all the text that you need. So if your text isn't that much, you can translate it and write it all here. So definitely, that's useful. The other thing we're just looking at is Easy Translate. It's a simple client for basically hitting the Google Translate API. Now the downside is, you get whatever the Translate API gives you. It may not be great. So for things that really, really matter, it's probably best to translate it yourself or ask someone to translate it and verify that it's, what you want. Because if your sign in is like enter your first name here and Google Translate tells you like put, you know, put your first something here and it's not name, like that could be problematic. Um, right. So it depends on the context, but if you want to translate maybe user inputted text to a different language, this could be a great way to do it using Easy Translate. It looks like it's very simple. You just pass it in, tell you to what language you want to pass it in. I assume since it's Google, they support a ton of different languages. Yeah, there's a list of languages. Okay. Yeah, a bunch. Pretty useful. So I would definitely recommend checking this one out for translations. One gem I want to also talk about is PG search. So in a few applications earlier on, we kind of had search, but we did search just for a specific model. So let's say you had like a user model. You can type in like a search, and it would search in the user's model for that relevant user. But let's say you want to build like a search bar at the very top of the application, and it searches across all of the different things you have. So it searches across different models. One way to do that, and this works for a lot of companies, is they build out a separate search engine. So like Elasticsearch or Solr, right? An entirely separate database that's mainly built for searching. But you don't have to do that if you don't want. There's an easier way to do that, especially at the demo and the early on stages, which is PG search. So the way that you do it is it's a gem. You install the gem, and for any model that you want to have be searchable, you include PG search on that class. So then what happens if you can even define what fields to search against. So for this case, we want the poem field to search against the title and the author. And this other class, flower, to search against the color. So when you invoke it like this, so you'd call PG search dot multi search, and you'd pass in some sort of string, and it would look, and it would then convert that to a query in Postgres against any of the fields defined in multi search. So in this case, right, we would include PG search. It's looking against contents. Right here, it's looking against these fields, make, model. You can even define conditions on it. So you say only index those fields if this is true, and you can apply either a method or a different lambda here. So whatever is defined after the if this results in a true, it'll go ahead and index the fields defined here, and then make them searchable. So you can say, all right, let's say on this model, search add in the user's name and email, right? We want those to be searchable. We also have like an event, so make the event name and the event type searchable. We also have tickets, so make the ticket type searchable, right? We also have venues, so make the venue name and the venue location searchable, right? So you can specify using this multi-searchable which specific fields and which model you want to make searchable. This gem will index them, store them in Postgres, and make it easier to search. So note that it does use a separate table. It'll create this PG search documents table. And so when you write an object to the database, it'll also make sure it gets written to the PG search documents table, which allows a quick index lookup. So lookup speed is actually pretty quick because it's already indexed all the different fields in the database. One thing to note is it uses that via an after save. So we had like validate hooks, and we had after save, after update, after hooks. The way this works is it uses an after save hook. So after it's saved to the database, it'll then actually write the proper fields to the PG search documents table. You also could create just searching on a specific model. So let's see here. There's multi-search and there's also search scopes. Let's see. You can also chain things, so it kind of builds into active records. So you can say, give me the first 10 results, give me pages, maybe I want second queries. Does it have specific scope search? Here it is. So you can also just use this to search a specific class. You can search, for example, just a blog post, and this way you'd search blog post, specifically, and you're not searching across all of your classes. But the search is very quick because rather than doing a Postgres text search, it's pre-indexing all the documents on write time, so the search lookup is very quick. So this is a useful tool for adding in like a global search across your application. So that's a neat gem as well to use. Last week we also talked about active job and background jobs. So if let's say we wanted a periodic job. Maybe we want a job that runs every day at midnight, and it looks up all the users' activity and sends out like an email summary. Right? That could be an example of a job we want. There are many tools to do that. So Heroku Scheduler is a Heroku add-on with a free plan, and it can be used to run rake tasks. So, right, in terminal, we invoked those. We'll go back in here. So in terminal, right, we invoked that by running Heroku run, and then we had some rake task. And that's we had some tasks, like notify all users, right? We had some tasks. Right, we could kick that off via Heroku run, but we also could then do the same thing with the scheduler. So we could say, every midday at midnight, or maybe every hour, collect everything and send out notifications. And Heroku Scheduler is a good tool for running periodically those rake tasks. If we wanted to have something a little more built in to Sidekick, there are some gems as well. So Sidekick Scheduler is a great way. It kind of sets it up using cron jobs, so you can define in an initializer file how often you want the job to run, and Sidekick Scheduler will make sure that the job gets placed into the Sidekick queue however many times you tell it to. There's another one here called Sidekick Cron, very similar. It uses Rufus Scheduler. Rufus Scheduler is a very well-used scheduler for all things Ruby. So whenever you want to schedule some job via Ruby, maybe at a specific time, every 3 hours, you want to schedule it in 10 days. Rufus Scheduler is great at that. So this gem, Sidekick Cron, uses Rufus Scheduler to schedule these jobs. But again, it's deeply integrated with Sidekick. So to make sure that the job gets placed into the Sidekick queue whenever you specify. So if you want to specify users every day with their summary, or anytime a user has some sort of notifications, maybe you batch them and every hour you send them out. Right? These are great tools to handle job scheduling for periodic jobs. Cool. Does that all make sense? Great. So one thing we didn't talk about that much is user roles and having different user positions. Oops. Didn't have that. So let's see here. Basic. I created just a shell of an app, just brand new Rails app. There's nothing in it. So we'll go ahead and create a model for a user. We want just a name, an email. Right, just very simple. But let's say we want a different user type. So we want like a user, but we also want an admin. Maybe the admin has access to special pages. Maybe the admin can see like that Sidekick page we talked about, right? We want some concept of an admin and a user. So I'm going to run Rails db create, db migrate here. And we have just a basic user. But maybe we want to start thinking about admin versus user. So we want to maybe define some fields. So maybe we define, as admin or something. And then how do we know if the user is an admin? Well, we can do this a few ways. We could, if we wanted to, we could add it in to the migration. So we could add in like a Boolean is admin. That's one option, right? And anytime we wanted to modify a user, we could just go to the database and change that admin flag from false to true. That works. Another way we could be like maybe we want to hard code it in initially so that no one can actually get to it. So maybe we'll say admin is like someone here, like so like admin right, at coderschool.vn or something, right? And what would we do here? Well, we take an admin, if like username equals admin or admin.include username, right? So we have our user or name, email, in this case would be email, right? So we say, are they an admin? Yeah, right? And so then in our application controller, right, we use devise. I guess this one's just basic, so we don't have it set up yet, but application controller, right? Typically when we add it in devise, right, we have like a before, right, filter. We say like authenticate user. Maybe we also have like an like a before action, right? Like require admin. And maybe this is only on certain pages, right? So maybe it's only on certain things, right? Like new or index, right? Something like that. And then we can define require admin, right? What happens here? Well, we simply say, let's redirect them to where? Probably the root path, right? Take them back to the home page, unless, current user is admin. And that is just hitting right here, or it's just admin, right? So essentially saying, when certain index pages or certain routes, and maybe on the controller level, we can add this in on a need-by-need basis. So certain routes, maybe we have an admin page that can inspect things on the back end. That Sidekick page we talked about, right? We can inspect all the background jobs. You probably want to restrict that to admins. And then we can basically say, if you're not an admin, take them back to the root path, unless you're an admin. And the way you can define admin is you can have it hard-coded. Maybe you have a config file. So maybe, admin file.load, something, and it's, something slash, like admin, and we don't have it in here, right? Or you can even put it into the database, so like that, right? All these are different ways of kind of accomplishing the same thing, but having still one concept of a user, but now just we have an admin privileges for that user that we can change at runtime. Cool. Sweet. So that was adding in an admin. One other thing I want to talk about is, what if we want to have users follow other users? So we want some sort of relationship between users, right? So that if I'm a user, I can have a list of followers or a list of people that I'm following, right? Kind of like friends. So say, hey, I like these 10 people. I want to log in, and when I log in, I want to see the activity of my 10 friends. Well, what could we do? We could do something like this. We could add in, I guess we'll do a separate migration so this way run. Following IDs to users. We want to add in following IDs. Right, so simply we would add in, right, the first, say, let's just do this very basic. We'll have an array in the database called following IDs. And this just stores for us a list of users that we're following. Okay? So it's just an array stored in the database of people we're following. So how do we, right, get a list of people we're following? Well, we probably say, IDs equals following IDs, right? We're simply looking in the database and getting that field. We have to do some work because it's a string, so we'll split it. Maybe we have a comma, right? We want to map them to integers, right? So we don't have strings, now we have integers. Great, so now we have our list of IDs, and then maybe we say, user.where ID is IDs. So now we can get a list of users we're following. And this is pretty basic, but pretty useful. So if we log in, we have a home page. Great, we'll grab a list of all the IDs of people we're following. Maybe once we get them, we can pull all their activity, right? So on the controller, on the home page, we would then load in the activity of those users and show that. But what if we wanted to follow, right, another user? Oops. What would that look like? Well, we have our following IDs, right? We probably want to, again, convert this to an array. right? Maybe we can move that code out. So maybe we can say, you know, or something like this. Right, so just refactoring here. Great, so we have our following IDs, right? And maybe then we want to say, go ahead and add in this another user, right? Their ID. And then maybe we'll go ahead and say, you know, right, or maybe we can just do this actually, following IDs dot push, and we'll add in another user dot ID to string. There we go. Right, that's just a little clunky. Now, what if I want to unfollow a user? Right, we say, all right, well, you know, that person, all they post is silly food photos. I really don't care about that activity stream. How do I unfollow them? Again, not the easiest because we're storing it as an array. So we have to probably get the, you know, the IDs, and then maybe we have to like delete, right, another user dot ID, and then maybe we say, you know, following IDs equals ints right here, IDs dot toString or something, right? So not great because we're processing through the array one at a time, but we're literally going through the array, finding the IDs of the person that we care about, and deleting it. So this is a most basic, very simple approach, but we could probably do better. We could probably, you know, think about how to use database tables to do this. So we'll scratch that, and we'll go ahead and delete that migration. Great, get rid of that, right? What if we use the database to our advantage? So we probably want to say, you know, let's just generate a table, and we want to call this following, and we're going to have two fields, right? Followed ID, that's an integer, and a following ID, that's an integer. And essentially what we're going to do is we're going to have a table, let's see, following. Right, we have a table, and it's just a one-to-one relationship between a follower and a followee. So it stores basically two IDs, right? We have followed ID, which is the person that we're interested in, right? We would say, all right, you know, we care about this person's information, and then the following is the person who actually cared about it. And this way, we have a table. It's a standalone table. We can say, give me all of the, you know, ID entries where, you know, following ID is me, right? You know, this is me. Give me all the entries where this is me, and then it returns to me a list essentially of all the people I'm interested in. And if I want to then delete someone, I can simply find that one record in the database table and delete it, and it's much simpler, right? So how do we use our Rails relationships to do that? We'd say, you know, has many, and I'm going to find here a helper called active relationships, and this is going to map to following. And there's going to be a foreign key on it, right? And what's the foreign key? This is our end of the table. So it's going to be following, I guess these names are kind of confusing. Follower and followed. Let's do that. So this is the person who is following somebody else, right? Like, I'm following, you know, Koi, so I would be the follower, and Koi would be the followed. Right? There's two. Have you guys heard the joke? There's two hard problems in computer science. There's two problems: cache invalidation and naming things. So this is a problem of naming things. So, and then we'll just finally add in the final thing: dependent destroy. I could probably, oops. Let's look a little nicer. All right, so now we have many relationships. We're not done yet though, right? Because this simply is kind of helping us map to this table. but it'll return to us essentially a bunch of IDs of the people that we are following. And that's useful, but we want to keep going. We want to say, I really care about the people that I am following, right? The people I'm interested in, I want to be able to get them. So we say, all right, the user has many people who they're following, but then we say we map that through active relationships. And the source here is going to be followed. Right? So this way we can go ahead and then say, give me the user.following, and it'll use this lookup table, which is a lookup of an ID to another ID, right? All still users, but it gives us access to all the Rails helpers. So user.following.build, right? User, rather than having to say user.where follow ID equals blank and then go fetch those IDs, right? It kind of helps us, gives us a nice handy interface to get the people that we're following. But it's still backed up by a database table with one-to-one relationships. So if we want to delete something, right, we can just look it up and delete that row. That's a very quick operation. If we want to find something, we can just look it up, very quick operation. And adding something, again, it's a constant time operation, adding something to the database table. And here we have our following. So we're going to create, we're just going to define our relationships finally. Belongs to and follower, last name, user. And again, on the other side, belongs to followed, class name is also user. Right? And that kind of rounds it out. And the term we use here, right, is right here as well. So this is how we kind of connect all of them and complete it out. So another way of kind of connecting relationships, right? We talked a lot about earlier on having nested resources, or has many, belongs to. But those are always between different sorts of models and different tables. This is one way to do it between the same table, right? So users still connecting to other users, same table, but they can have relationships through this lookup table, and it gives us an easy way to add friends, delete friends, and find out who our friends really are through this following thing. Clear? Great. Alrighty, so the last thing I want to touch upon for this week is building your own Ruby gem. Ruby Gems has a bunch of, it's the main hosting site for gems. We've all seen the advantage of using gems, right? They're very powerful libraries. Now let's say you wanted to build your own gem. Why? Well, maybe you have some code that you really want to share with everyone. It's also just a great way to kind of practice things. And so I'm going to create a directory here. So I'm going to create a directory. Let's just do a random word generator. Random word gen. So we'll create a simple gem to create a random word. It's kind of cool if you can talk about this in like an interview, for example, like, oh, I made my own gem, published it. Right? It kind of gives you a nice kind of thing to talk about in an interview. As well as it's also very helpful just to learn the process. Kind of informs you what is needed to build your own gem. A lot of gems are always looking for people to contribute with pull requests, and so it's another way to also just contribute to the open source community and start to build out more expertise. So we created a directory. It's very simple. The way to start a gem is you run bundle gem. Right, bundle we've been using to install all of our gems. It's also very helpful for creating a gem. So we want to actually install that gem, but we want to go inside of it. So we're going to first enter that directory, and then we're going to create the gem inside of that directory. Great. So here we are inside the directory. We have a bunch of things. Let's go ahead and inspect what they look like. So I'm going to close out this guy. Close out this guy. Great. So the first thing that's important is our gem spec file. And here it's random word gem spec. So it's this file right here. And the gem spec kind of explains to Ruby gems, everyone else, what the gem is doing. So you see here gem name, version, an author, and an email. And the version is defined in this file. So we open it up, just 0.1.0, right? The most basic version starting off works for us. Mic information, it'll throw an error because of this to-do. So let's just write a quick summary. Generate a random word. There's also a description. You can delete this line. We'll just keep it Fantastic. You can also then, once you publish it, have a link here to the GEM's webpage. You can choose a different license. The MIT is a standard license to release it, which is basically free and open source, but provided as is. This is code to prevent you from pushing to Ruby gem. So if you're still in development, you can use this. You can just delete this, and it allows you to push to any host. So if someone wanted to fork this gem and push it to their own private gem server, they could. Or you could just say, only push this gem to Ruby gems, whatever. Down here, we have different development dependencies, and these are dependencies that the gem needs. So in a regular Rails app, we have a gem file. Here, if you notice we have a gem file, it asks us instead to specify our dependencies in the gem spec. So if we want to use another gem in our gem, perfectly acceptable. We have to just add it here, right? Add in the development dependency. Let's say I wanted to use like a testing framework, right? Like WebMock. So we have many tests already here. WebMock as a testing framework lets you stub out your API calls, so you're not actually making API calls in your tests. We could add in here. We could specify if we wanted to a minor version, if we're afraid of updates that might break our gem, something like that, right? So dependencies you add in here, but once you do that, you still run bundle, and the gem will install for you all the dependencies that you need. Looks like I need to install. Cool. So that's the gem spec. We also talked about the version. So every time you want to publish it, you want to update the version. Here we have the major version, the minor version, and the patch version, standard semantic versioning. There's also a README. README gets used for right on the GitHub homepage. So maybe ways, usage, how to use the gem, ways to contribute to the gem, to encourage other people to contribute to it. Nowadays, it also added a code of conduct, which is kind of nice. So just kind of a way to kind of basic rules. If you're going to contribute, please be open and welcoming to everyone. Don't harass people online, that sort of thing, which is fantastic that that's added in. Great. So now our gem is set up. It does very basic things. You notice there's already a test folder included, and it's set up. My preference is mini test, so it included mini test already here. And we have one test, which is just basically that a version number exists. Very basic. There's also a test helper. So here's going to run and add in mini test. It also requires our gem here so that the gem gets loaded in. So let's see. So great. We have bundler installed. Looking pretty good. How do we run the tests? We simply run, right? In Rails, we ran Rails tests. If we run that here, what will happen? Right? It won't recognize it, right? It'll say Rails, like, what are you trying to do, right? This is not a Rails app. Now this is just a plain old Ruby app. So we got to do a rake task. Rake test. Nope. Random is not a module. Let's see. I think I used too many dashes. Try this again. Bundle gem. Cool. And we'll update the gem spec. Click that line. And it also establishes for us a Git repository. Great. So let's see now if we try to run rake test. Great. The test runs. And it looks like it says one passed and one failed. So let's see what failed. We have our test helper, which just loads in things. And we have here, great. So we have refute nil. At least basically the version exists. Version does exist, and we can confirm that here. But it also has in a basic test here, just run false to make sure that our tests fail initially. So it looks like our test is up and running. We can start running some tests. How do we interact with our gem? The first ways we can interact with it is via the tests. So we can write some tests, see how the gem works, start to exercise it that way. We also could exercise it via the command line. So we could run bin console. And what happens there is there's a bin folder here. Let me show that. So there's a bin folder, and it basically runs bin console and bin setup. The setup is something that new developers can run. So if you want to contribute, you'd say download the repository, run bin setup, and any setup steps that would need to happen, you can add it in here. Our gem is very basic, doesn't need that, so we'll keep that as is. Another one is bin console. If you run bin console, you notice it starts up an IRB, and it loads in your gem, so that then your gem can start to be used. Again, if you have certain things you want to use, you can put it in here. Maybe you have API keys, right? Maybe I need to configure something like an API key, and I can do it, this way. And I can say then, config dot, API key equals some key, and that way my gem has access to the keys that it needs, and I would load those in before I actually start IRB, right? So this is a great way to kind of handle any sort of configuration that needs to be done. We'll run it. Bin console. Great. Now if we access WordGen, we see it's there. It comes with just standard class methods that Ruby provides, but there really is no functionality because we have yet to actually implement anything. So let's write some tests and go from there. Again, we're using mini tests, so anything in this folder will get run. For now, we'll just keep our tests here. So we said this is a random word generator. So test, random returns a string, and we're just going to say random equals wordgen dot random, and we're going to say assert that's not nil, and let's also make sure that random is a string. Cool. So our test is there. We're going to run rake test. And this is test-driven development, so we should expect this to fail. Undefined method random. Good. We have yet to define it. Let's go ahead and define it. So we'll go into the lib folder, and there's here our wordgen module, right? Code goes in here. We'll define self.random. And run the test again. Great. The test executed, there's no error, but expected false to be truthy, and that's because we're returning nothing. So let's just say we return a simple string. What happens? Oh, our test pass. And so far, our early testing is that we return a string. Just maybe add in a separate test. So test, we want to test randomness, which is kind of a hard thing to test. So we'll just test test all words are not the same. And we'll just say, let's just say, like one dot like 5 dot map wordgen dot random. Oops. And then maybe we'll say assert words dot unique dot length is greater than 1. And if it fails, we'll say expected all words, at least one word, to be different. All right, so we're expecting at least, let's see if that fails. Okay, good. So the test failed because right now all we're doing is returning just a simple word. And if we even retested, this, we could just put out here, puts words equals words, just to see what's going on. And we get here, right, every time we call it, we get the exact same thing back. No surprise there because that's what we returned. Our test is failing. So now that we have our test set up, we can start to actually implement the functionality. So how will we do that? Well, we could probably have a file with a bunch of words, but for now I'm just going to say, let's just define some basic words just as a proof of concept. We're also going to add in this dot freeze, which basically prevents anyone from changing this array after we've set it up. Let's just some words. So just give me some words. Chair. Let's do buffalo. Anyone else? One more word. Red Bull. All right, great. Starting some words. What should we do? Well, just random.rand, and we're gonna want some numbers. So say words.length. Words.sample. That. There we go. So now if we run bin console, we can call wordgen, and we could call .random. All right, try two different words. Cool. And same thing, right? We ran the tests, and we got just some words back. Pretty basic, but functionality at least is there. So now we're feeling pretty confident, right? We have our gem spec, and we say just generate simple random words. We define some tests, so we have some test coverage. We'd probably want to update the README as well. So maybe add in ways that this what this gem does. And we have our basic functionality. Nothing special, but it works. So the final step is publishing our gem. So let me pull up the documentation. You can publish it to any gem server. Some people host their own gem servers. A lot of companies host their own. But Ruby Gems is the standard, just kind of open library. So publishing here, the way you publish it is you say gem push. It's really that simple. So we have here our gem spec. So first we got to build the gem. Gem build wordgen dot gem spec. Great. And you actually want to make sure you don't commit this to your Git. So it adds it here. We want to make sure that we don't commit the actual gem binary to our Git repository. But we have it there. And then we say gem push. And we're pushing it to Ruby gem. So wordgen version 0.1. We'll go ahead and push invalid URI. And it looks like we, in the gem spec, didn't remove this part. So here it's preventing us from publishing. So it's allowed gem host. So, oops. I think we want to just try that. So we gotta rebuild and push. Home is not be a valid URL. Let's see, where is home? Home page on gem spec. Oh, here it is. For now, we'll go ahead and just remove that. Let's see if that works. So we'll build it again. We'll push it. And there it is, wordgen. So now we'll go to Ruby Gems. And with any luck, there we go. So now we've published a gem. Our dependencies are listed here. You can start to see different versions. So far, 0 downloads, no love. You can, on the gem spec, you can add in that homepage. So if I push this to Git, I could put in the Git repository here, and then essentially it would add in a link here for the homepage. And if you click on that, it'll take you to that GitHub repository page. But that's how we create a gem. So the infrastructure is very simple, right? A few lines. We have our gem file set up. We can add in some tests, add in some code, and then run gem push. And that gives us the opportunity to actually push our gem to Ruby Gems. Again, pretty cool to kind of create your own gem or contribute to a gem. Definitely nice for an interview. Good practice, and it kind of helps you learn more about gem process, about running good Ruby code. So I would encourage all of you to think about maybe writing a gem. If you find something that needs to be created, if there's a lack of some library out there, something that you feel would be useful that other people might also find useful, by all means, don't hesitate to create your own Ruby gem. It's also just it's a neat exercise if you want to just try one out, create a gem. It could be very simple, does some basic things, but it's a pretty cool learning process as well. Alrighty, any questions? Can you delete the gem? Yes, I think you have to sign in. I remember my password. Shoot. If I sign in, I think I can delete it as the owner of the gem. I forget my password though. But you can delete gems, yeah. But only the owner has that privilege. Say it again. You could, right? So the gem is not a Ruby, it's not a Rails, it's a Ruby thing. But let's say you notice in the course of your project that you have some code that will be useful, like another, just like useful Ruby code that can be useful in other places. Maybe you're like parsing a certain API and getting results, right? You're like, oh, this could be useful to other people. Let me abstract that code, that section of the project, into its own gem, push that gem out, and then you can just, on your gem file, use that gem. That's very cool. You wouldn't put all of your code in the gem file, but maybe the parts that could be useful to other people, or parts that are, maybe even within the context of your own application. Maybe you have code that gets called by a bunch of different spots, and you say, hey, I want to abstract this out in its own gem because 4 different parts of my code use this. Go ahead and put it in a gem, publish the gem, and then use that gem in your application. Definitely a possibility. I'm not a judge at Demo Day, but that could look also favorably to the judges. Who knows?